a lonely millionaire visits his wife's grave, as he does every month. But this time, two abandoned twin girls appear with a naive request to write a letter to their mother, who is in heaven. Upon seeing his wife's photo, his world falls apart. Overcome with guilt and rediscovered love, he makes a choice that will forever change three destinies. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The winter wind whipped through the Manhattan cemetery, biting at Maxwell Grant's exposed skin as he made his familiar monthly pilgrimage. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the gray sky, dusting the shoulders of his tailored Armani coat. His Italian leather shoes crunched against the frozen path as he approached the polished marble headstone he knew by heart. Maxwell's breath clouded before him as he knelt, brushing snow from Catherine's grave marker. His fingers, usually commanding boardrooms and signing million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as they traced her engraved name. 23 months since the illness took her, and the ache remained undiminished. "I closed the Singapore deal," he whispered, placing a bouquet of white roses against the cold stone. The board wanted to celebrate, but he trailed off, swallowing hard. "I came here instead." Only here in this silent place did Maxwell Grant, the business titan who'd built Grant Enterprises from nothing into a Fortune 500 company, allow his carefully constructed facade to crack. Here, he was simply a man who missed his wife. At 52, Maxwell had everything money could buy. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, vacation homes in the Hamptons and Aspen, a private jet, and an empire that continued to grow despite economic uncertainties. Everything except someone to share it with. Catherine had been his anchor, his moral compass, his reason to come home. Without her, his massive penthouse felt emptier than the studio apartment they'd shared when they were starting out. "Mr. Grant?" The hesitant voice startled him. Maxwell quickly composed himself, rising to his feet with the practiced poise of someone accustomed to unexpected interruptions. He turned to find two small figures standing several feet away, partially obscured by a nearby oak tree. They were identical twin girls, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with tangled blonde hair and wide blue eyes. Their matching coats were worn thin at the elbows, several sizes too large, and clearly inadequate for the February cold. One clutched a tattered teddy bear missing an eye, the other held a crumpled piece of paper. "Can we ask you something?" the girl with the teddy bear asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Maxwell glanced around, searching for an adult who might belong with these children. The cemetery was deserted, except for an elderly groundskeeper in the distance. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his tone gentler than the one he used in boardrooms. The girls exchanged a look laden with meaning beyond their years. "Mummy's in heaven," said the one with the paper, pointing vaguely upward. "Like your friend?" Maxwell's throat tightened. "And your father?" Another exchanged glance. "He doesn't want us," the teddy bear girl said matter-of-factly. Maxwell approached them slowly, kneeling to their level despite the snow soaking through his expensive pants. Up close, he could see dark smudges under their eyes and hollows in their cheeks that spoke of missed meals. "I'm Emma," said the girl with the teddy bear. "This is Olivia." "Do you know how to write?" Olivia asked, extending the crumpled paper. "Real pretty writing. We want to send a letter to our mommy, but Miss Jenkins next door says we're too little to write proper." Something about their direct, unguarded gazes pierced Maxwell's carefully constructed armor. "Yes, I can write. What would you like to say to your mother?" Emma stepped forward. "That we're being brave like she told us, and that we miss her stories and her hugs. And ask if she can see us from heaven," Olivia added earnestly. Maxwell accepted the paper, reaching into his coat for a pen. "Do you have a picture of your mother?" he asked, more to distract himself from the unexpected emotion welling in his chest than anything else. Emma nodded solemnly and pulled a worn photograph from her coat pocket. "This is Mommy," she said, handing it to him with careful reverence. Maxwell took the photo, his business-like politeness already forming a gentle refusal to get further involved. But as he glanced down, the words died in his throat. His hand began to tremble, and not from the cold. The woman in the photo was smiling broadly, her arms around the twins who looked perhaps a year younger. But it wasn't the twins that held Maxwell's attention. It was her, Sarah Wilson. The same Sarah who 27 years ago had found him sleeping in an alley behind the diner where she worked in Brooklyn. 17-year-old Maxwell, face bruised from his father's latest drunken rage, had finally run away with nothing but the clothes on his back. Sarah, barely 22 herself, had taken him home to her tiny apartment. She'd fed him, cleaned his cuts, given him her couch, and eventually helped him get his GED and a scholarship to college. Sarah, who believed in him when no one else did. Sarah, whom he'd promised to always look after once he made it big. Sarah, whom he'd completely lost touch with after Catherine got sick, after he'd become consumed with building his empire. "Your mother's name was Sarah?" he asked, his voice barely steady. Emma nodded. "Sarah Wilson. She was the best mommy in the whole world." Memories flooded back. Sarah's infectious laugh, her unfailing optimism despite working 2 jobs, her absolute conviction that Maxwell would someday change the world. The last time he'd seen her was at Catherine's funeral. She'd hugged him, told him to call if he needed anything. He never did. When did she... Maxwell couldn't finish the sentence. 3 weeks ago, Olivia said, scuffing her worn sneaker against the snow. She got real sick, and the medicine was too expensive. "Miss Jenkins next door checks on us, but she's real old," Emma explained. "We've been taking care of ourselves mostly." "You've been alone for 3 weeks?" Maxwell asked, aghast. The girls nodded in unison. "We're doing okay," Emma insisted, lifting her chin in a gesture so reminiscent of Sarah that Maxwell's chest ached. "We promised Mommy we'd be brave." A harsh gust of wind made the girls huddle closer together, their thin jackets offering little protection. Without thinking, Maxwell shrugged off his cashmere scarf and wrapped it around their small shoulders. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Ridgewood," Olivia answered. "In Queens. We took the subway here because Mummy always brought flowers to Grandma's grave, but we got lost." Maxwell stood, his decision made before he was even conscious of it. "Would you let me help you get home? And perhaps we could get something to eat first. You must be hungry." The twins looked at each other again, having one of those silent conversations that only twins seem capable of. Finally, Emma nodded. "Mommy said you were a good person," she said simply. Maxwell froze. "Your mother talked about me?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "She had a picture of you in her special box. She said you were her friend who became a big success and that she was real proud of you." Something shifted in Maxwell's chest, something that had been cold and dormant for a very long time. He held out his hands, one to each twin. After a moment's hesitation, they took them, their small fingers ice cold against his. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said gently. As they walked toward the cemetery gates, Maxwell cast one last glance at Catherine's grave. For the first time since losing her, he felt something besides grief, a sense of purpose, of obligation. Not the kind that drove his business deals, but something deeper, more fundamental, the kind that Sarah Wilson had once shown to a frightened, abused teenager with nowhere to go. Maxwell's Bentley idled outside a dilapidated apartment building in Ridgewood, Queens. His driver, Rodriguez, had raised an eyebrow when instructed to drive to this address, but asked no questions. It was one of the reasons Maxwell had kept him on for 15 years. "Wait here," Maxwell instructed, helping the twins from the back seat. After a quick stop for warm clothes and hot food, Emma and Olivia led him up 3 flights of stairs, past graffiti-covered walls and the unmistakable smell of mold. They reached a door with peeling paint and 3 different locks. "Miss Jenkins has the other key," Emma explained, retrieving a key from under a loose floorboard. "For emergencies." The apartment was small but spotlessly clean, a testament to Sarah's character. 2 rooms plus a tiny kitchen and bathroom. What struck Maxwell most wasn't the poverty, but the warmth. Colorful children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A bookshelf overflowed with well-worn children's books. A small Christmas tree, still up in February, stood in the corner with handmade ornaments. "This is our home," Olivia said proudly, unaware of how the contrast with Maxwell's 5,000-square-foot penthouse was affecting him. Maxwell moved through the space, noting the precision with which everything was organized. Clothes folded neatly, dishes stacked carefully, not a toy out of place. Sarah had clearly taught her daughters to care for their things, regardless of how little they had. On a small desk sat a stack of past-due bills and final notices, medical bills from Queen's Hospital Center, rent overdue by 2 months, an eviction warning. Maxwell's jaw tightened as he realized the extent of Sarah's struggles, struggles he could have easily alleviated had he known. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. An elderly woman with steel grey hair peered in, eyes widening at the sight of Maxwell in his expensive coat. "Girls? Who's this gentleman?" Her voice was wary, protective. "This is Mr. Maxwell," Emma said. "He was Mommy's friend." "Miss Jenkins, this is my mother's friend," Olivia added. "He wrote a letter to Mommy for us." The elderly woman's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Sarah never mentioned any wealthy friends. Maxwell extended his hand. "Maxwell Grant. I knew Sarah many years ago. She helped me when I had nowhere to go." Recognition dawned in the woman's eyes. "Wait, are you the boy in that old photograph, the one she kept in her memory box?" Maxwell nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Miss Jenkins invited herself in, settling into the apartment's single armchair. "Sarah was the best neighbor I've ever had," she said, watching the twins as they showed Maxwell their favorite books. After what happened, I've been checking in on the girls, bringing food when I can, but I'm on a fixed income myself, and with my arthritis," she gestured to her cane. "What about family services?" Maxwell asked quietly. Miss Jenkins snorted. "They came once, said they'd be back to place the girls. Sarah's cousin in Baltimore said she might take them, but that was 2 weeks ago. These bureaucracies move slow, and meanwhile," she gestured to the twins, now sitting on the threadbare couch whispering to each other. Maxwell processed this information, his mind working with the same intensity he applied to business decisions. "The girls mentioned their father?" Miss Jenkins's face hardened. "Jason Miller. Never married Sarah. Disappeared before they were born. Showed up once asking for money when they were babies. Sarah told him to leave and never come back." She leaned closer. "Between you and me, I don't think he even remembers they exist." Maxwell nodded, a plan already forming. "Miss Jenkins, would you excuse us? I'd like to speak with Emma and Olivia." The old woman leveled a stern gaze at him. "These girls have been through enough, Mr. Grant. Whatever you're thinking, they're not charity cases." Maxwell met her gaze steadily. "Sarah changed my life once. I owe her a debt I can never repay." Something in his tone must have convinced her. Miss Jenkins nodded slowly, rising with effort. "I'm in 3B. Those girls need anything, day or night, you let me know." After she left, Maxwell sat down on the couch between Emma and Olivia. "I have a proposal for you both," he said carefully. "Would you like to come stay with me for a while? My home is very big and very empty, and I think your mother would want me to look after you." The twins exchanged another of their silent communications. "Can we bring our toys?" Emma asked seriously. "And Mommy's picture," Olivia added. "Of course," Maxwell replied, relieved at their simple concerns. "We can bring anything you'd like." "Even our Christmas tree?" Emma asked hopefully. Maxwell smiled, his first genuine smile in months. "Especially the Christmas tree." While the girls packed their treasures into small backpacks, Maxwell made some calls. To his assistant, cancelling his meetings for the week. To his lawyer, requesting immediate research on temporary guardianship. To a child psychologist who'd helped with a charity his company supported. Within 2 hours, they were driving back to Manhattan, the twins marveling at the leather seats and the TV screens in the Bentley's headrests. Maxwell watched them, these tiny mirrors of Sarah, and felt something he hadn't experienced since Catherine's diagnosis: hope. His penthouse in the glass and steel Olympus Tower occupied the top 2 floors, with views that stretched across Central Park to the Hudson River. As the private elevator rose silently to the 85th floor, Maxwell suddenly saw his home through the twins' eyes. The stark, minimalist furniture, the monochromatic color scheme, the absence of anything remotely child-friendly. "Wow," Emma whispered as the elevator doors opened directly into the foyer. "Is this a hotel?" "It's where I live," Maxwell replied, suddenly self-conscious about the coldness of the space. "Where are all your toys?" Olivia asked, looking genuinely concerned. Maxwell found himself at a loss. I don't really have toys." "Everyone should have toys," Emma declared with the absolute certainty of a 5-year-old. They explored the penthouse, the girls' eyes widening at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the floating staircase to the upper level, the kitchen with its professional-grade appliances that Maxwell rarely used. He showed them to the guest rooms, letting them choose which one they wanted. "Can we share?" Olivia asked, clutching her backpack. "We always sleep together." "Of course," Maxwell replied, leading them to the largest guest suite. "This one has 2 beds, but we can push them together if you'd prefer." After they'd settled in, Maxwell ordered dinner from their favorite Italian restaurant. As they ate pizza at his formal dining table, something Catherine would have never allowed, he found himself entranced by their chatter, their identical mannerisms, the way they finished each other's sentences. Later, after improvised baths in his oversized jacuzzi tub, which the twins declared was like a swimming pool, Maxwell found himself doing something he'd never anticipated: reading bedtime stories. The girls had insisted on unpacking their favorite books immediately, and now he sat between them on the king-sized bed, reading about a princess who rescued herself from a tower. "That's not how you do the voices," Emma corrected when he read the dragon's lines. "Mommy always made the dragon sound scared, not mean." "Like this?" Maxwell tried again, softening his tone. Olivia nodded approvingly. "Better." When they finally drifted off to sleep, Maxwell remained sitting between them, watching their peaceful faces. He thought of Sarah, of her kindness to a desperate teenager all those years ago. He thought of Catherine, who'd always wanted children, but couldn't have them due to the same condition that eventually took her life. And he thought of himself, the driven, successful, lonely man he'd become, who suddenly found himself responsible for 2 small lives. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant, his CFO, his board members. For the first time in his career, Maxwell Grant let them wait. Instead, he carefully extricated himself from between the sleeping twins and went to the guest room across the hall. Opening his laptop, he began searching for information on adoption processes, on children's needs after losing a parent, on how to create stability amid grief. As the city lights twinkled beyond his windows, Maxwell worked with the same focused intensity he brought to multi-million-dollar acquisitions. This, he realized, might be the most important project of his life. The first week with Emma and Olivia transformed Maxwell's life in ways he couldn't have imagined. His meticulously organized schedule, once dedicated to meetings and market analyses, now revolved around kindergarten drop-offs and princess movies. His kitchen, previously used mainly for storing takeout containers, now housed alphabet cereal and strawberry milk. On day 3, Maxwell hired Maria Delgado, a warm grandmotherly nanny with impeccable references and experience with twins. By day 5, he had enlisted a team of decorators to transform the penthouse's second guest room into a proper children's space, with twin beds shaped like carriages, a reading nook, and walls painted with a forest scene. "The children will need structure and routine, Dr. Winters," the child psychologist had advised during their first consultation. "And they need to know this arrangement isn't temporary, that they're not just waiting for another disruption." Maxwell took this advice to heart. He established bedtimes and mealtimes, created a chore chart with gold star stickers, and designated Friday nights as movie nights with unlimited popcorn. These simple routines, so foreign to his previous lifestyle, became anchors in his new reality. The most surprising change, however, wasn't to his home or his schedule. It was to himself. Maxwell found himself laughing at breakfast as the twins told elaborate stories about their stuffed animals. He discovered a well of patience he never knew he possessed when teaching them to use chopsticks, and he experienced a fierce protectiveness that surpassed even his most aggressive business instincts. On a crisp March morning, 2 weeks after bringing the girls home, Maxwell sat in his home office reviewing emails while the twins colored at a small table he'd set up for them. His lawyer, Harrison Wells, was due any minute with updates on the guardianship process. "Mr. Max?" Emma's small voice interrupted his thoughts. She still hadn't mastered his full name. "Yes, Emma?" She held up a drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall with brown hair, 2 small with yellow pigtails. "This is our family, you and me and Olivia." Maxwell stared at the drawing, a lump forming in his throat. "It's beautiful," he managed. Emma beamed. "Can we put it on the fridge? Mommy always put our pictures on the fridge." "Of course." Maxwell rose, taking the drawing with careful hands. "Let's go do that right now." In the kitchen, he used a magnet shaped like the Empire State Building to secure the drawing to his stainless steel refrigerator door, the first personal item to adorn the appliance since he'd moved in 5 years ago. The elevator chimed, announcing Harrison's arrival. Maxwell ushered the twins back to their coloring table, with promises of ice cream later if they played quietly during his meeting. Harrison Wells had been Maxwell's attorney for 15 years. Nothing fazed him. Not hostile takeovers, not SEC investigations, not multi-billion-dollar negotiations. But today he looked decidedly uncomfortable as he laid out a folder on Maxwell's desk. "I've completed the preliminary work regarding temporary guardianship," Harrison began, his voice carefully neutral. "There are complications." Maxwell leaned forward. "What kind of complications?" "To begin with, there's no will. Sarah Wilson didn't leave any legal instructions regarding the girl's care. That's not surprising. She was young, healthy, until suddenly she wasn't." Harrison nodded. "Without a will designating you as guardian and with no blood relation, the courts typically prefer to place children with family members. Miss Jenkins mentioned a cousin in Baltimore who hasn't bothered to check on them," Maxwell countered. "Yes, we located her. Amanda Reeves. She's expressed interest in taking the girls but hasn't initiated any formal proceedings yet." Maxwell frowned. "What's her situation?" Harrison consulted his notes. Single mother, 2 children of her own, works as a dental assistant, limited financial resources, but stable employment. "And the father, Jason Miller." Harrison's expression tightened. "That's the other complication. We found him in Jersey City. He's aware of the situation and has indicated he might pursue his parental rights." Maxwell's jaw clenched. "After abandoning them before they were born?" "Unfortunately, biological ties carry significant weight in family court, and while your financial resources are obviously superior, the courts don't award custody based solely on economic advantage." Maxwell glanced over at the twins, now deeply engaged in a coloring competition. "What are my options?" Harrison laid out several paths forward. Petition for temporary guardianship while pursuing adoption, negotiate with the cousin and the father, or prepare for a potentially lengthy court battle. "The fastest route would be if both the cousin and the father willingly terminated their rights," Harrison explained, "but that's rarely straightforward." "Make it happen," Maxwell said firmly, "whatever it costs. These girls deserve stability, not to be pawns in some negotiation." After Harrison left, Maxwell sat alone in his office, contemplating the legal mountain ahead. He was accustomed to opposition in business, competitors trying to undermine him, regulators scrutinizing his moves. But this was different. This wasn't about market share or profit margins. This was about Emma and Olivia. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. Olivia stood beside his chair, her expression solemn. "Are you sad, Mr. Max?" Maxwell managed to smile. "Not sad, just thinking about some grown-up problems." Olivia climbed into his lap without invitation, a liberty she'd never taken before. "Mommy said when you have grown-up problems, hugs make them smaller." Maxwell wrapped his arms around her tiny frame, breathing in the scent of the children's shampoo Maria had purchased. "Your mommy was very wise." That evening, after the twins were asleep, Maxwell found himself drawn to the small box of Sarah's personal items that Miss Jenkins had insisted he take. He hadn't had the courage to look through it yet, but tonight, seeking connection and perhaps guidance, he carefully opened the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, and mementos, the treasures of a life lived with limited means but abundant heart. Maxwell found the photo the twins had mentioned, himself at 18, gangly and serious in a second-hand suit, standing beside Sarah outside the community college where he'd earned his scholarship. "Maxwell's first day of college," read Sarah's handwriting on the back. "Future tycoon." Beneath a stack of the twins' baby pictures and school art projects, Maxwell found a small leather journal. Opening it with careful fingers, he recognized Sarah's handwriting immediately. The journal entries spanned years, chronicling her life as a single mother, her struggles and joys. Maxwell found his name scattered throughout, updates on his career that she'd followed from afar, pride in his accomplishments, occasional wistfulness about their lost connection. The final entry, dated just weeks before her illness, read, "Saw Maxwell on the cover of Business Week today. The girls thought it was so funny that Mommy knows someone famous. I thought about calling him so many times over the years, especially when things got really tough after the girls were born. But his life went in such an amazing direction. The last thing he needs is an old friend asking for help. Still, I keep that promise he made tucked away in my heart, that when he made it big, he'd come back and help me too. Sometimes promises are more about the making than the keeping. I'm just so proud that the scared boy I found in that alley became such an extraordinary man. If anything ever happens to me, I hope the girls find someone with even a fraction of his determination to look after them." Maxwell closed the journal, tears falling freely now. Sarah had needed him, and he'd been too absorbed in his own world to notice. He hadn't kept his promise, but he could keep it now for her daughters. The next morning, Maxwell called his executive team and informed them he would be working remotely indefinitely. He rearranged his schedule to be home for dinner every night. He hired the best family law attorney in New York to supplement Harrison's efforts, and he began the process of transforming the cold, minimalist penthouse into a real home. The twins' Christmas tree found a permanent place in the living room, despite it being March. Their artwork appeared on walls previously reserved for expensive, abstract pieces. A corner of the living room became a play area with a dollhouse nearly as tall as the girls themselves. 3 weeks after the cemetery meeting, Maxwell took the twins to the Central Park Zoo. As they watched the sea lions perform, Olivia slipped her hand into his. "Mr. Max," she said hesitantly, "at school Ryan said we're orphans now. Is that true?" Maxwell knelt down to their level, looking into 2 identical pairs of blue eyes, Sarah's eyes. "No," he said firmly. "You have me, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" Emma asked, her voice small but hopeful. "I promise," Maxwell replied, and for the first time in decades he felt the full weight and meaning of those words. This wasn't a business commitment or a strategic pledge. This was a vow to 2 small girls who had already lost too much. Later that night, as he tucked them into their new princess beds, Emma asked the question he'd been dreading. "Mr. Max, can we call you Daddy?" Maxwell froze, a storm of emotions overwhelming him. Catherine's face flashed in his mind, her smile when they talked about having children someday, her tears when they learned they couldn't. "How about we start with just Max?" he suggested gently. "No Mr. needed, Mr. and we'll see where things go from there, okay?" The twins nodded solemnly, accepting this compromise with the flexibility of children accustomed to adapting to adult complications. That night, Maxwell dreamed of Sarah. She was sitting in his ultra-modern living room, looking completely out of place yet perfectly at ease, just as she had in life. "You're doing good, Max," dreamed Sarah said with her familiar smile. "They need you, and maybe you need them too." Maxwell woke with tears on his pillow and certainty in his heart. These girls were his responsibility now, not out of obligation to Sarah's memory, but because somewhere in the past 3 weeks they had become his family. April brought showers, blooming tulips in Central Park, and the first major challenge to Maxwell's newfound family. The twins had been living with him for 6 weeks when Harrison called with the news. "Jason Miller has filed for custody," Harrison said without preamble. "His lawyer contacted me this morning." Maxwell tightened his grip on the phone. "On what grounds? He's been completely absent from their lives. He's claiming he didn't know about Sarah's passing and that he's been trying to establish a relationship with the girls for years but was prevented by their mother." "That's a lie," Maxwell said flatly. "Miss Jenkins confirmed he hasn't been around since they were infants. Unfortunately, it's his word against a neighbor's, and as the biological father, the courts give him substantial consideration." Harrison paused. "There's more. He's alleging that you essentially kidnapped the girls from their home and that you're using them to improve your public image after last year's controversy with the pharmaceutical acquisition." Maxwell's blood ran cold. The Novartis deal had been completely above board, despite media speculation about insider information. The SEC had cleared him entirely, but the suggestion had lingered in certain circles. "That's absurd," Maxwell replied, struggling to keep his voice even as the twins played with building blocks in the next room. "I've made no public statements about the girls. Few people even know they're with me. Miller's lawyer is Carter Reynolds," Harrison continued. "He specializes in high-profile custody cases, usually representing the less affluent party against wealthy opponents. He's built his reputation on painting the wealthier party as buying children's affection or using them as accessories." Maxwell paced to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. "What's Miller really after, Harrison? We both know it's not the girls." Harrison sighed. "My guess, money, classic shakedown. Money. He's probably hoping you'll pay him off to go away rather than endure a public custody battle." "Not happening," Maxwell said immediately. "Those girls are not bargaining chips." I anticipated that response, Harrison replied. I've already filed our petition for guardianship and begun building our case. But Max, his voice softened, using the nickname reserved for private conversations, this could get ugly. Reynolds will dig into every aspect of your life. Your work hours, your romantic history since Catherine, any potential skeleton in any closet. Let him, Maxwell said firmly. I have nothing to hide, and I have the resources to fight this as long as necessary. After hanging up, Maxwell stood in the doorway watching Emma and Olivia construct an elaborate castle from blocks and cardboard. In 6 short weeks, they had brought life and color to spaces that had been merely stylish before. Their laughter echoed through rooms that had known only silence. Their presence had transformed not just his home, but his heart. The thought of losing them to a father who saw them only as leverage made his chest constrict with a rage he'd never experienced, even during the most hostile corporate takeovers. The following day, Maxwell met Jason Miller for the first time. The court had ordered a mediation session before proceeding with formal hearings. Maxwell arrived with Harrison and Patricia Winters, the family law specialist he'd retained. Jason Miller was younger than Maxwell had expected, perhaps in his early 30s. He wore a suit that seemed new but poorly fitted, his tie slightly askew. Beside him sat Carter Reynolds, whose reputation for theatrical courtroom performances was well earned. Mr. Grant, Reynolds began with a practiced smile, my client appreciates your temporary care of his daughters during this difficult time, but he's eager to reunite his family and provide them the father they deserve. Maxwell maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened. The girls deserve stability and love, which is exactly what I've been providing. With all due respect, Reynolds continued, children belong with their biological parents when possible. Mr. Miller has a modest but comfortable home in Jersey City, a steady job at his brother's construction company, and a genuine desire to know his daughters. A desire that was conspicuously absent for the past 5 years, Patricia Winters interjected smoothly. Reynolds' smile didn't waver. My client made mistakes in the past which he deeply regrets. He was young, overwhelmed by the prospect of twins, and frankly, intimidated by Ms. Wilson's strong personality. Now he's matured and wants to step up to his responsibilities. Maxwell studied Miller, who shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. And what changed, Mr. Miller? Why the sudden interest in parental responsibility? Before Miller could answer, Reynolds placed a hand on his arm. My client's motivations aren't on trial here, Mr. Grant. The simple fact is that he is their father, while you are, legally speaking, nothing to them. The mediator, a gray-haired woman with decades of family court experience, intervened. The purpose of today's session is to determine if there's a path forward that serves the children's best interests without prolonged litigation. Mr. Miller, could you share your thoughts on what arrangement would work for the girls? Miller cleared his throat. I want full custody, he said, his first words since the meeting began. They're my kids. I can take care of them now. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Maxwell asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Do you know that Emma is allergic to strawberries? That Olivia can't sleep without her stuffed elephant? That they both have nightmares about their mother being gone? Miller flushed. I can learn that stuff. They're just kids. They're not just kids, Maxwell replied, his voice low and controlled. They're Emma and Olivia. They're individuals with needs, preferences, fears, and hopes. They've lost their mother, their home, and everything familiar. What they need now is stability, not another upheaval. The mediator nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Miller, what's your living situation? Would the girls have their own room? Miller glanced at Reynolds before answering. I've got a 1-bedroom place now, but I'm looking at bigger apartments. They could share the bedroom while I take the couch until I find something better. Patricia Winters made a note. And childcare. The girls attend kindergarten until 2:30. What arrangements would you make for the remainder of the workday? Again, Miller looked to Reynolds. My girlfriend could watch them sometimes, or maybe my mom, though she works too. As the questioning continued, the contrast between Miller's vague plans and Maxwell's established arrangements became increasingly apparent. The girls were thriving in their new school. They had regular therapy sessions with Dr. Winters. They had a consistent routine with Maria, educational weekend activities, and a stable home environment. By the end of the session, the mediator's expression made her assessment clear. I'll be making my recommendations to the court, but I strongly encourage both parties to consider the girl's emotional well-being above all else. Further disruption would not be ideal. Outside the mediation room, Reynolds pulled Maxwell aside while their respective legal teams gathered their materials. "My client is a reasonable man, Mr. Grant," Reynolds said quietly. "He understands your attachment to the girls, and he's willing to be flexible for appropriate consideration." Maxwell stared at him. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Reynolds shrugged. "Children deserve financial security, a trust fund for their education perhaps, and certainly their father deserves compensation for the years of parenting he'll be sacrificing." "You mean the years of parenting he's already sacrificed?" Maxwell replied coldly. "Let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Reynolds. I will not be paying your client to abandon his children a second time." Reynolds' pleasant facade hardened. "Then I hope you're prepared for what comes next. The court of public opinion can be far more brutal than family court. A billionaire using his money and influence to tear children away from their working-class father. The media will have a field day." Maxwell stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Threaten me all you want. Threaten my reputation, my business, whatever you think will pressure me. But understand this, those girls are not negotiable. I will spend every dollar I have, use every connection I've ever made, before I let them go to someone who sees them as a payday." Reynolds studied him for a moment, perhaps reassessing his opponent. "Your choice, Mr. Grant. See you in court." That evening, Maxwell returned home to find the twins building a fort from couch cushions and blankets with Maria's help. Their faces lit up when they saw him, and they raced over with excited updates about their day at school. After dinner, baths, and their nightly reading ritual, Maxwell sat between their beds for their customary chat time. "Max," Emma said, using the name they'd settled on. "Tyler at school said his daddy and mommy had to go to court when they got divorced. Is that where you went today?" Maxwell paused, unsure how much to share. Dr. Winters had advised honesty but age-appropriate explanations. "Yes, I was at court today. It was a meeting to talk about some grown-up things." Olivia sat up in bed. "Was it about us? Miss Jenkins said someone might try to take us away." Maxwell silently cursed the well-meaning but loose-lipped neighbor. "No one is taking you away," he said firmly. "I promised I would take care of you, and I keep my promises." "But what if the judge says we have to go?" Emma persisted, her small face pinched with worry. Maxwell moved to sit on her bed, gathering both girls close. "Listen to me, both of you. There are some complicated grown-up things happening, and yes, they involve where you'll live. But I want you to know two important things. First, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy. And second, no matter what happens, you will always be important to me." "Do we have to see our real dad?" Olivia asked in a small voice. Maxwell chose his words carefully. "At some point, the judge might want you to meet him. Would that be okay?" The twins exchanged one of their silent communications. "We saw him once," Emma finally said. "When we were little. He came to our apartment and yelled at Mommy about money. He was scary." Maxwell filed this information away, another piece of evidence for their case. "If you ever have to meet him, I promise I'll be right there with you. You won't be alone." After the girls finally fell asleep, Maxwell called Harrison. "I need everything you can find on Jason Miller. Work history, criminal record, financial situation, everything. Reynolds offered a deal today. Miller wants to be bought off." "Not surprising," Harrison replied. "Want me to make a counter-offer?" "No," Maxwell said firmly. "We're going to fight this properly. Those girls deserve better than to be treated as assets in a transaction." That night, Maxwell barely slept. He kept thinking of the twins' worried faces, of Miller's indifferent attitude, of Reynolds' thinly veiled threats. For the first time since building his business empire, Maxwell faced an opponent he couldn't simply outmaneuver with superior resources or strategy. This wasn't business. This was family, and the stakes had never been higher. The custody hearing was scheduled for early May, giving Maxwell's legal team just 3 weeks to prepare. Harrison assembled a formidable group: family law experts, character witnesses, child development specialists, and investigators tracking Jason Miller's every move. Meanwhile, Maxwell maintained the twins' routine with fierce determination. He attended parent-teacher conferences, helped with homework, and continued their Friday movie nights as if nothing were amiss. But beneath his calm exterior, anxiety gnawed at him constantly. The judge assigned to our case is Eleanor Simmons, Patricia Winters informed him during a strategy session in his home office. She's fair, but traditional. She tends to favor biological connections unless there's clear evidence of unfitness. What about the mediator's report? Maxwell asked. Helpful but not definitive, Harrison replied. She noted the girl's strong attachment to you and the stability you provide, but also emphasized Miller's biological rights. Patricia leaned forward. Our strongest argument is continuity of care. The girls have suffered a significant trauma with their mother's passing. Removing them from their current stable environment could cause additional psychological harm. Maxwell nodded, glancing at the framed drawing Emma had made, now prominently displayed on his desk. What about Miller's past? The incident the girls mentioned when he came to the apartment? We found a police report, Harrison confirmed. Domestic disturbance call 3 years ago. Sarah reported Miller showing up intoxicated, demanding money. No charges filed, but it's in the record. And his current situation? Patricia consulted her notes. Lives in a one-bedroom apartment in Jersey City. Works sporadically for his brother's construction company. Payroll records show frequent gaps. 3 traffic violations in the past 2 years, 1 for driving with a suspended license. No serious criminal history, but not exactly Father of the Year material. The girlfriend he mentioned? Amber Jenkins, Harrison supplied. Together about 8 months. Cocktail waitress at a club in Hoboken. 2 prior arrests for disorderly conduct. Charges dropped both times. Maxwell processed this information, formulating their strategy. We focus on stability and the girl's best interests. No character assassination unless absolutely necessary. I don't want to turn this into a media circus. Harrison and Patricia exchanged glances. About that, Harrison began carefully. Reynolds has been talking to the press. Nothing explicit yet, but he's been dropping hints about a David versus Goliath custody battle brewing. Maxwell's jaw tightened. Let him. We stay above it. The girl's well-being is all that matters. The following week, as predicted, the first article appeared, a seemingly innocuous piece in the New York Post about the challenges working-class parents face when battling affluent parties for custody. Jason Miller wasn't named, but the article mentioned a New Jersey construction worker fighting to regain custody of his twin daughters from one of Manhattan's wealthiest business leaders. More stories followed, each more pointed than the last. A blog specializing in business gossip published a piece titled Billionaire's Latest Acquisition, Children, complete with long lens photos of Maxwell taking the twins to school. A morning radio show spent 20 minutes discussing whether wealthy people collected children like trophies. Despite his legal team's advice to respond with a carefully crafted statement, Maxwell maintained his silence. The girls don't need to see their situation splashed across the media, he insisted. We handle this in court, not in the press. But the pressure intensified when Reynolds orchestrated a sympathetic interview with Miller on a local news program. Looking appropriately humble in a clean work shirt, Miller spoke tearfully about wanting to be there for my little girls and feeling intimidated by all the money and power on the other side. The day after the interview aired, Maxwell received a call from the chairman of his board. The stock dropped 3 points this morning, Jonathan Harrington informed him without preamble. Investors are nervous about this custody situation. The publicity isn't good, Max. The market fluctuates, Maxwell replied evenly. It will recover. The board is concerned about your focus. You've been working remotely for nearly 2 months, missing critical meetings. I haven't missed anything critical, Maxwell interrupted. I've delegated appropriately and remained fully engaged in all strategic decisions. Nevertheless, Harrington continued, we need to discuss optics. Perhaps a temporary guardianship arrangement would be more prudent until this blows over. Show the courts and the public you're being reasonable. These are children, Jonathan, not a PR problem to manage, Maxwell said, his voice dangerously quiet. I'll address the board's concerns about company performance at our next meeting. My personal life is not up for discussion. After hanging up, Maxwell stood at his window watching rain streak down the glass. For the first time in his career, his professional and personal worlds were colliding in a way he couldn't neatly separate. The empire he'd built, that had defined him for so long, suddenly seemed secondary to the 2 small people who now called his penthouse home. The day before the hearing, Dr. Winters conducted her final evaluation with the twins. Maxwell waited anxiously in his office while she spoke with them privately in the living room. Her assessment would be critical evidence. "They're remarkably well adjusted considering the circumstances," she reported afterward. "They express strong attachment to you and clear anxiety about the possibility of leaving. They refer to this as home now, and their memories of Miller." Dr. Winters hesitated. "Limited but predominantly negative. They remember him yelling, their mother crying afterward. They expressed fear about meeting him again." Maxwell nodded grimly. "Will you include that in your report?" "I have to report what they told me," she confirmed. "But children's recollections aren't always given significant weight, especially at their age." The morning of the hearing arrived with a media presence outside the family court that rivaled major criminal trials. Reynolds had clearly been busy. Reporters shouted questions as Maxwell's security team escorted him from his car to the courthouse steps. "Mr. Grant, is it true you're using these children to rehabilitate your image after the Novartis scandal? Are you trying to buy these kids like you buy companies? Do you think your money entitles you to take children from their real father?" Maxwell kept his eyes forward, his expression neutral. Patricia had coached him extensively. Show emotion but not anger, confidence but not arrogance, attachment to the girls without seeming possessive. Inside, the courtroom was mercifully journalist-free, though packed with observers. Judge Simmons, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes, called the proceedings to order with brisk efficiency. Reynolds opened with a passionate speech about biological bonds and parental rights, painting Miller as a working-class father, desperately trying to reconnect with his children against the overwhelming resources of a billionaire. "These children have a father who loves them," Reynolds declared, his voice rising dramatically. "Her father who may not have a penthouse or a private jet, but who shares their blood, their heritage, their very DNA. Can Mr. Grant, for all his wealth, provide that fundamental connection?" Patricia Winters' approach was methodical by contrast. She presented evidence of the stable environment Maxwell had created. School records showing the twins' improved performance, Dr. Winters' psychological evaluation, testimony from their teachers about their positive adjustment. "The law is clear," Patricia argued. "The paramount consideration must be the best interests of the children. Emma and Olivia have suffered an immense loss. They need consistency, security, and emotional support, all of which Mr. Grant has provided without reservation." The morning proceeded with expert witnesses and character testimony. Maxwell's executive assistant described his transformed schedule, now built around school hours and bedtimes. The twins' teacher praised his involvement in their education. Dr. Winters detailed the importance of maintaining their current stability. After lunch, it was Miller's turn. Under Reynolds' careful questioning, he presented himself as a reformed man who had made youthful mistakes but now wanted to embrace fatherhood. He spoke of plans to move to a 2-bedroom apartment, to adjust his work schedule, to create a life for my girls. But during cross-examination, Patricia methodically dismantled this image. She established that Miller had made no child support payments, had never sent birthday cards, had no idea about the girl's medical history or educational needs. When pressed about his confrontation with Sarah 3 years earlier, Miller grew defensive and evasive. "So to clarify," Patricia pressed, "you visited their apartment unannounced, demanded money from Ms. Wilson and left without asking about your daughter's well-being?" Miller shifted uncomfortably. "I was going through a rough time. I needed cash." "Did you ask to see your daughters during this visit?" "I don't remember. Maybe." Patricia let the answer hang in the air before continuing. "When did you last attempt to contact Ms. Wilson before her passing?" Miller looked to Reynolds, who couldn't help him now. "I don't know. A while ago." "Would phone records showing no calls from your number to Ms. Wilson in the past 4 years be accurate?" Miller's face flushed. "Look, Sarah made it difficult. She didn't want me around. So difficult that you made no effort whatsoever to see your children for 4 years." By the time Patricia finished, Miller's carefully constructed image had crumbled. During a brief recess, Harrison leaned over to Maxwell. "We're in a strong position. Simmons is hard to read, but she was taking a lot of notes during Miller's cross-examination. When the court reconvened, Judge Simmons announced she would hear directly from Maxwell and Miller before making her determination. Maxwell took the stand first, conscious of every word, every gesture. Mr. Grant, the judge began, you've known these children for less than 3 months. What makes you believe you're better suited to raise them than their biological father? Maxwell took a deep breath. Your Honor, I don't claim any special qualifications as a parent. 3 months ago, I knew nothing about kindergarten curricula or how to braid hair or why stuffed animals need to be arranged in a specific order at bedtime. I've been learning every day because Emma and Olivia deserve nothing less. He paused, gathering his thoughts. What I can offer them is consistency, stability, and an absolute commitment to their well-being. I made a promise, to them, to their mother's memory, and to myself, that I would protect them and provide the home they deserve. It's a promise I intend to keep regardless of the outcome today. Judge Simmons studied him carefully. These proceedings aren't about your promise, Mr. Grant. They're about what's best for 2 5-year-old girls who have already experienced significant trauma. Yes, Your Honor, Maxwell agreed. Swell. And what's best for them is to remain in the environment where they're thriving, with the support system that's already in place, surrounded by the stability they desperately need. Judge Simmons made a note. Thank you, Mr. Grant. You may step down. After hearing from Miller, whose testimony seemed increasingly rehearsed and hollow, Judge Simmons called a brief recess to review the evidence before announcing her decision. Maxwell sat perfectly still at the plaintiff's table, his usual confident demeanor replaced by genuine fear. For all his wealth and influence, he was powerless here, unable to negotiate, unable to leverage his resources, unable to control the outcome. When Judge Simmons returned, her expression gave nothing away. This court's responsibility is to determine placement based on the best interests of the minor children, she began. While biological connections are significant, they are not the only factor to consider. She reviewed the evidence methodically. The girl's current stability, Miller's long absence, the professional assessments, the material circumstances of both households. Maxwell's heart pounded as she approached her conclusion. Given the evidence presented, this court finds that the children's current placement provides necessary stability during a period of significant emotional adjustment. Therefore, I am granting temporary custody to Maxwell Grant, with a review hearing scheduled in 6 months to reassess the situation. Relief flooded through Maxwell, but it was short-lived. However, Judge Simmons continued, Mr. Miller is granted visitation rights, to begin with supervised visits twice monthly. Additionally, before the review hearing, I am ordering a home study for both residences and a more comprehensive psychological evaluation of the children by a court-appointed specialist. She fixed both men with a stern gaze. Let me be absolutely clear. This court will not tolerate any attempt to influence the children against either party, nor will I look favorably on media campaigns designed to sway public opinion. My decision will ultimately be based on what serves these children best, not what serves the adults involved. With a sharp rap of her gavel, the hearing was adjourned. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Maxwell turned to Harrison and Patricia, his expression a mix of relief and concern. It's a victory, Patricia assured him. Temporary custody is a strong indicator for the final determination. But not a guarantee, Maxwell replied, watching as Miller conferred with Reynolds across the room. This isn't over. No, Harrison agreed grimly, but it's a start. Outside, ignoring the barrage of questions from reporters, Maxwell had only one thought: getting home to Emma and Olivia. For the first time in his meticulously controlled life, his priority wasn't closing a deal or outmaneuvering a competitor. It was telling 2 little girls that at least for now they could stay home. The first supervised visitation with Jason Miller was scheduled for a Saturday in late May at a family services center in Midtown. Maxwell spent the preceding week helping the twins prepare emotionally, following Dr. Winter's careful guidance. Remember, it's just for 2 hours, he reassured them that morning as they picked at their breakfast, and Miss Daniels will be there the whole time. Emma pushed her cereal around the bowl. What if he's mean again? Miss Daniels won't let that happen, Maxwell promised, though his own stomach churned with anxiety. And I'll be waiting right outside the whole time. Olivia looked up with worried eyes. What if he tries to take us away? Maxwell knelt beside her chair. That won't happen. The judge said you stay with me. This is just a visit, so you can get to know each other a little. We don't want to know him, Emma declared with unexpected vehemence. We want to stay with you. Maxwell carefully masked his satisfaction at these words. Judge Simmons had been crystal clear about not influencing the girls against Miller. Sometimes grown-ups have to do things we don't want to do, he explained gently. This is one of those times, but no matter what, I'll be right there when it's over. The visitation center was a cheerful space, designed to put children at ease. Colorful furniture, toys, books, and games scattered throughout. Jacqueline Daniels, the court-appointed supervisor, greeted them warmly. We'll be in the blue room today, she explained, kneeling to the twins' level. It has a dollhouse and lots of puzzles. Your dad, Mr. Miller, is already waiting. Maxwell felt Emma's hand tighten around his. It's okay, he whispered, giving her a reassuring squeeze. You're brave girls, remember? As Daniels led the twins down the hall, Maxwell fought every instinct telling him to follow, to protect, to intervene. Instead, he took a seat in the waiting area, where he would spend 2 of the longest hours of his life. Jason Miller, for his part, seemed genuinely nervous when the twins entered the visitation room. He'd bought new toys, identical dolls for each girl, and wore a clean button-down shirt that still had the store creases. Hi, he said awkwardly as Daniels made introductions. You probably don't remember me, but I'm your dad. The twins said nothing, standing shoulder to shoulder, identical expressions of wary assessment on their small faces. Miller glanced at Daniels, who nodded encouragingly. I brought you something, he continued, pushing the dolls forward. Your mom told me you like dolls. Our mommy's in heaven, Olivia stated flatly. I know, Miller replied, his confidence faltering. I was real sorry to hear that. Your mom was she was a good person. Max says Mommy was the kindest person he ever knew, Emma added pointedly. Miller's expression tightened at the mention of Maxwell's name. Well, I knew her pretty good too. We were together before you were born. Then why did you leave? Olivia asked with the brutal directness of a 5-year-old. Daniels intervened smoothly. Why don't we play a game to get to know each other better? Jason, the girls love puzzles. Maybe you could help them with that dinosaur one. The visit continued with stilted conversation and awkward activities. Miller tried, in his limited way, to connect with the twins, but his efforts were hampered by his own discomfort and their reluctance. By the time Daniels announced the end of the session, all 3 seemed relieved. In the hallway afterward, Miller stopped Maxwell with a raised hand. Can we talk, without the lawyers and all that? Maxwell hesitated, then nodded to Maria to take the twins to the car. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to Miller. What is it? Miller shuffled uncomfortably. Look, I know what Reynolds is doing with the media and all. That wasn't my idea. What do you want, Miller? Maxwell asked directly. Those girls barely know me, Miller admitted, running a hand through his hair. And they obviously care about you. Maxwell waited, sensing there was more. Reynolds says we can win this thing, or at least drag it out long enough that you'll make a deal. Miller lowered his voice. But those 2 hours in there were the longest of my life, man. I don't know how to be a dad to 2 kids who look at me like I'm a stranger. They look at you that way because you are a stranger, Maxwell replied evenly. You've been absent their entire lives. Miller nodded slowly. Yeah, that's on me, I know. He glanced toward the exit where the twins had disappeared. They seemed good, though, happy. Better off than they would be with me, that's for damn sure. Maxwell studied the younger man's face, searching for the angle. What are you saying exactly? I'm saying maybe we can work something out, something that makes sense for everyone. There it was. The opening for the payoff Reynolds had been angling for all along. Maxwell felt a surge of disgust. If you're suggesting I pay you to give up your parental rights... No, man, listen, Miller interrupted, surprisingly earnest. I'm not cut out for this. Those girls deserve better than me trying to figure out how to be a dad after 5 years of nothing, but I also can't just walk away with nothing to show for it. Maxwell's expression hardened. They're children, not assets in a business transaction. I know that, Miller insisted, but Reynolds has me on the hook for his fees, and my brother's giving me grief about missing work for court dates, and... He trailed off, seeming to realize how self-serving he sounded. Look, I'm not asking for millions or anything crazy. Just something to get a fresh start. Maybe help with Reynolds' fees. And maybe, I don't know, some kind of trust for the girls that I could check on sometimes. Maxwell considered the man before him. Not the villain he'd constructed in his mind, but a deeply flawed individual who at least recognized his own limitations. I'll have my lawyers contact Reynolds, Maxwell said finally, but understand this. Any arrangement we make will prioritize the girls' well-being. This isn't about buying you off, it's about creating the most stable situation possible for Emma and Olivia. Miller nodded, relief evident in his posture. Yeah, that's fair. As Maxwell turned to leave, Miller called after him. Hey, Grant, you're good with them, better than I could be. Maxwell didn't respond, but the words followed him to the car, where the twins waited anxiously for reassurance that they wouldn't have to leave their new home. The negotiation with Reynolds was surprisingly straightforward once Miller had made his position clear. In exchange for terminating his parental rights, Miller would receive a modest one-time payment, officially designated as relocation assistance, and a small annual stipend for 10 years, contingent on his maintaining geographical distance and refraining from any unauthorized contact. Additionally, Maxwell established a substantial trust fund for the twins' education, with annual statements to be sent to Miller, his one connection to the daughters he was relinquishing. Judge Simmons, initially skeptical of the arrangement, ultimately approved it after thorough review and a private conversation with Miller. The court is satisfied that this agreement serves the children's best interests, she declared at the final hearing. Mr. Grant is granted full legal and physical custody of Emma and Olivia Wilson, with the termination of Jason Miller's parental rights as stipulated. She fixed Maxwell with a stern gaze. Mr. Grant, the court recognizes your commitment to these children. However, I want to be absolutely clear. This ruling is not about your financial resources or legal team. It is about the stability and care you've demonstrated and which these children deserve to maintain. I understand, Your Honor, Maxwell replied solemnly. Thank you. Outside the courtroom, away from reporters and curious onlookers, Harrison shook Maxwell's hand. Congratulations. It's rare to see a custody case resolved this cleanly. Maxwell nodded, his mind already on the twins waiting at home with Maria. Have the adoption paperwork prepared. I want to start that process immediately. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Adoption? You have full custody now. Legally, that's nearly the same thing. Nearly isn't enough, Maxwell replied firmly. I want them to have my name if they want it. I want there to be no question about our family status, and I want it done before the new school year. As his car navigated through Manhattan traffic, Maxwell's phone buzzed with notifications, emails from his executive team, messages from board members, updates on market fluctuations. For nearly 3 months, he'd been operating at reduced capacity, delegating more than usual, attending meetings virtually when possible. Despite his fears, Grant Enterprises hadn't collapsed without his physical presence. The company he'd built was more resilient than he'd allowed himself to believe. The realization was strangely liberating. When Maxwell arrived home, the twins were waiting with a banner they'd made with Maria's help. "We get to stay forever," painted in wobbling letters with handprints on either side. Their cheers when he entered the penthouse echoed off the walls that had once known only silence. That evening, after their usual bedtime routine, Maxwell sat between their beds for their nightly chat. "So we don't have to see him anymore?" Olivia asked, clutching her stuffed elephant. "No," Maxwell confirmed. "The judge said you'll stay with me from now on." "Forever and ever?" Emma pressed. "Forever and ever," he assured them. Emma sat up suddenly. "Does that mean we can call you Daddy now?" The question, first posed weeks earlier and carefully deferred, hung in the air. Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat as he thought of Catherine, of the children they'd never had, of the man he'd been before the cemetery and the man he'd become since. "I would be honored if you called me Daddy," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "But only if that's what you want. You can still call me Max if you prefer." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, then nodded in unison. "We want to call you Daddy," Olivia declared, "because that's what you are. You take care of us and love us, and that's what daddies do," Emma added with the simple wisdom of childhood. Maxwell gathered them both in his arms, overwhelmed by a feeling he couldn't quite name, a mixture of gratitude, responsibility, and bone-deep contentment. "I love you both very much," he managed, his voice unsteady. "We love you too, Daddy," they replied in perfect synchronization, the new title falling naturally from their lips. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Maxwell stood at the window of his home office, gazing out at the city lights. 3 months ago, his life had been ordered, predictable, and hollow. Now it was chaotic, exhausting, and filled with a purpose he'd never imagined possible. His phone buzzed. Harrington again, no doubt, with more concerns about his continued remote work arrangement. Maxwell silenced it without checking. Whatever business crisis loomed could wait until morning. Tonight was for savoring the knowledge that Emma and Olivia were officially, legally staying. Tomorrow, he would begin reorganizing his work life more permanently. The penthouse in Manhattan was wonderful, but perhaps not ideal for raising children. The Hamptons property had extensive grounds, a good school nearby, room for bicycles and play sets and all the childhood experiences he wanted the twins to have. And perhaps it was time to reconsider his role at Grant Enterprises. He'd been CEO and chairman since founding the company 15 years ago, maintaining iron control over every aspect of its operations, but there were capable executives who could take on more responsibility, allowing him the flexibility his new life required. As these thoughts crystallized into plans, Maxwell was struck by a realization. Everything he'd achieved in business, everything he'd built and acquired and controlled, paled in comparison to what he felt watching Emma and Olivia sleep peacefully in their beds, secure in the knowledge that they were home. For the first time, Maxwell Grant understood what true success meant, and it had nothing to do with balance sheets, market share, or corporate acquisitions. It was measured in bedtime stories, in butterfly bandages on skinned knees, in the trust of two small girls who had chosen him as their father. In a life defined by strategic decisions, Maxwell recognized that his most important choice had been made that day in the cemetery, not from calculation or analysis, but from the heart he'd nearly forgotten he possessed. Winter returned to New York, bringing with it the first anniversary of Maxwell's chance meeting with the twins. The city sparkled with holiday decorations, and a fresh blanket of snow covered Central Park, visible from the penthouse windows where a Christmas tree now stood, a real one, not the artificial designer piece that had previously occupied the space. Much had changed in 12 months. The adoption had been finalized in September, giving the girls Maxwell's last name officially, though they had claimed it in their hearts long before the paperwork was complete. Grant Enterprises had restructured its leadership, with Maxwell stepping back to chairman while promoting his longtime COO to CEO. The board had initially resisted, but Maxwell's determination had prevailed, as it always did in business matters. Most significantly, they had moved to the Hamptons property full-time, using the penthouse only when necessary for Maxwell's reduced schedule of Manhattan meetings. The beachfront estate, once a showcase property used primarily for summer entertaining, had been transformed into a genuine family home. The formal dining room now featured artwork on the refrigerator and a height chart on the doorframe. The manicured gardens included a playset and a treehouse built to the twins' exacting specifications. The media room, once dedicated to market projections, now showed animated movies as often as financial reports. Today, however, they were back in the city for a special occasion. Maxwell adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror as Emma and Olivia emerged from their room in matching blue dresses, their blonde hair arranged in intricate braids courtesy of Maria, who had relocated with them to the Hamptons. "Are we ready for our big day?" Maxwell asked, kneeling to straighten Emma's slightly crooked collar. The twins nodded solemnly. At 6 years old, they had matured noticeably over the past year, still identical in appearance but increasingly distinct in personality. Emma, the more analytical of the pair, approached life with careful consideration. Olivia led with emotion and intuition, often speaking for both of them in new situations. "Daddy," Olivia began, using the name that still sent a wave of emotion through Maxwell every time he heard it. "Will there be a lot of people there?" "Just the important ones," he assured her, knowing her discomfort with crowds. "And you don't have to speak if you don't want to. You can just stand with me." The Sarah Wilson Memorial Health Clinic would be dedicated today in Queens, funded by the foundation Maxwell had established in her name. The clinic would provide free or low-cost medical care to uninsured families, with a special focus on preventative care and childhood illnesses, ensuring that no other parent would face Sarah's impossible choice between rent and life-saving treatment. As their car navigated through morning traffic, Maxwell observed the twins whispering together, their unique twin language still occasionally emerging despite Dr. Winters' assurance that they were developing healthily as individuals. "What are you two conspiring about?" he asked with a smile. Emma looked up. "We have a surprise for you later," But it's a secret, Olivia added quickly. A Christmas secret. Maxwell raised his hands in surrender. I won't pry then. Christmas secrets are sacred. The clinic stood on a corner lot in Ridgewood, just blocks from the apartment where the twins had lived with Sarah. The modest building had been completely renovated, its brick facade brightened with a mural depicting children playing beneath a protective canopy of trees. A small crowd had gathered despite the cold. Local officials, healthcare workers, community members, and a few carefully selected media representatives. As Maxwell stepped from the car with a twin on each hand, he caught sight of a familiar figure near the entrance. Miss Jenkins, using a walker now but still straight-backed and sharp-eyed at 83. The twins spotted her simultaneously, their faces lighting up. Miss Jenkins, they called in unison, rushing forward as Maxwell followed at a more measured pace. The elderly woman beamed as the girls hugged her carefully. Look at you two, growing like weeds and pretty as pictures. Maxwell greeted her warmly. Miss Jenkins had been a frequent visitor to their Hamptons home since relocating to a senior living community in Southampton. Maxwell's quiet arrangement after the apartment building in Ridgewood changed ownership and raised rents beyond residents' means. They've been practicing their speeches all week, he told her with a proud smile. Miss Jenkins patted his arm. Sarah would be bursting with pride today, for all of you. The dedication ceremony was brief but meaningful. The local congresswoman spoke about community healthcare needs. The clinic's newly appointed director outlined their services. And then Maxwell stepped to the podium, the twins standing beside him in perfect miniature versions of his serious expression. Sarah Wilson was an extraordinary woman, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. When I was 17 and had nothing, no home, no hope, no future, Sarah extended a hand without hesitation. She shared what little she had and showed me what true generosity looks like. He glanced down at the twins, drawing strength from their presence. Sarah saved my life, though she never sought recognition or repayment. Years later, her daughters Emma and Olivia came into my life under circumstances Sarah could never have anticipated. They saved me again, in ways I'm still discovering daily. Maxwell gestured to the clinic behind him. This facility won't just provide medical care, it will embody Sarah's fundamental belief that we are responsible for each other, that extending a hand to someone in need isn't charity, but humanity. That's the legacy we honor today. He stepped back, making space for the twins at the microphone. They had insisted on speaking despite their nervousness. Emma went first, reading carefully from her note card. Our mommy was the best mommy in the world, she said, her voice small but clear. She always helped people, even when we didn't have a lot ourselves. Olivia leaned forward. Now we have a new daddy who helps people too. And this clinic will help lots of kids have mommies and daddies who don't get sick. Their simple words affected the crowd more deeply than any eloquent speech could have. There wasn't a dry eye among the staff members, who would soon begin caring for the community's most vulnerable residents. After the ceremonial ribbon cutting and obligatory photographs, Maxwell and the twins visited Sarah's grave. It was their monthly ritual, keeping the promise to maintain connection with the woman who had shaped all their lives so profoundly. The cemetery was peaceful under its blanket of snow. Maxwell stood back slightly, giving the girls their moment to place fresh flowers and speak their private messages to their mother. He had his own silent conversation with Sarah during these visits, part gratitude, part promise, part ongoing dialogue about raising her daughters. That evening, back at the penthouse, after dinner and baths, the twins announced it was time for their surprise. You have to sit on the couch and close your eyes, Emma instructed with adorable seriousness. Maxwell complied, listening to their excited whispers and the rustling of paper. After what seemed an unnecessarily long preparation time, Olivia announced, "Okay, you can look now." He opened his eyes to find them standing before him, holding a large, somewhat lopsided homemade book titled Our Family Story in colorful letters. We made it with Maria's help, Emma explained proudly, but we did all the writing and pictures ourselves. It's our whole story, Olivia added, from the beginning until now. Maxwell accepted the precious item, carefully turning the construction paper pages. The twins had illustrated their history together, beginning with stick figures in a cemetery, progressing through their move to the penthouse, the court battle represented by angry-looking scribbles, and their eventual adoption depicted with a large heart surrounding 3 smiling figures. The final page showed their current home in the Hamptons, with a Christmas tree and what appeared to be a dog, a not-so-subtle hint regarding their ongoing campaign for a puppy. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received," Maxwell said honestly, his voice thick with emotion. Emma looked at him seriously. "We asked Maria, and she said it's been a whole year since you found us at Mommy's special place. So it's our family anniversary," Olivia continued. "Maria said people celebrate anniversaries of important things." Maxwell gathered them both into his arms, this pair of remarkable children who had transformed his existence from a life into a life worth living. "It's definitely worth celebrating," he agreed. "Finding you two was the most important moment of my life." Later, after the twins were asleep in their Christmas-decorated bedroom, Maxwell sat in his office with their handmade book open before him. Beside it lay a small velvet box containing the gift he planned to give them on Christmas morning. Delicate lockets with tiny photographs of Sarah on one side and the 3 of them on the other. A tangible connection between their past and present. His phone buzzed with a text from Harrison, something about an acquisition opportunity that couldn't wait until after the holidays. A year ago, Maxwell would have immediately shifted into business mode, regardless of the hour or occasion. Now he simply set the phone aside. Whatever it was could wait until morning. Through his window, he could see snow beginning to fall again, adding to the pristine blanket covering the city. He thought of another snowy day 1 year earlier, when 2 small girls had approached him in a cemetery with a simple request to write a letter. He couldn't have known then how completely that moment would redefine his existence. The successful business titan, who had measured life in acquisitions and achievements, now measured it in bedtime stories and science projects, in nightmares soothed and bicycle rides accompanied, in 1,000 ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. Maxwell closed the twins' handmade book and placed it carefully on his shelf. Not hidden in a drawer or tucked away, but displayed prominently alongside the business awards and recognition that had once defined his worth. It belonged there, this crude paper testament to the journey that had saved him from a life of hollow success. In the morning, he would wake to twin voices excitedly discussing the fresh snow and possibilities for sledding. He would make pancakes shaped like snowmen, help bundle small bodies into winter gear, and experience the pure joy of watching Emma and Olivia experience the season with unfiltered enthusiasm. But for now, in the quiet of the winter night, Maxwell Grant, billionaire business leader and most importantly father, offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the chance encounter that had led him here, and for the wisdom to recognize it as the gift it was. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in pristine white. A blank page, a fresh start. A new year of family stories waiting to be written.